Alright guys, welcome back, and in this episode we're going to keep working on the race car and we're going to build an engine to go with that transmission we built in the last episode. So this is basically going to be the same as the other engine I built. If you want to see that, you can look at the thing here and go watch that. But this is going to be basically stock with a few upgrades. So as you can see clearly, I've got ARP main studs in, and we're going to do ARP head studs, and I've done something to the pistons there. But other than that, it's basically going to be stock. And so I'm going to flip through it real quick, and I'll just stop and go through every little detail that I did differently here. But other than that, so we're basically using a regular block. I don't even remember the year. We're using a 3rd gen crank, stock rods, hyper-eutectic pistons. We're doing 2 intake cams instead of an intake and exhaust cam. We'll go through that when I get there. So basically the plan is, let's get that crank in there. Alright guys, so there we go, 1 crank installed. And I will say with the ARP main studs, if you're going to install them, you will have to have your block line honed. Because stock torque is 33 pounds on the factory bolts, and the ARPs are up to 60. And when I measured my clearances, I went from 1.5 thou clearance with factory bolts to 1.5 thou interference with the ARPs. So I did have to send my block off to be a line hone. Alright, so now we're ready to put the pistons in, so I'll show you what I did to the pistons. Now these are just regular hyper-eutectic sealed power pistons. They're about $200 and some odd a box of 4. And what I did is I sprayed Cerakote's ceramic coatings on these. This is their piston coat on the top, and this is a lubricant kind of coating that holds lubricant in it or something and promotes good piston sliding in the hole kind of deal. So I've sprayed that on there mostly as an experiment just to see what would happen. But my theory behind it is that this is a heat resistant ceramic coating. And hyper-eutectic pistons, I don't really have a problem with heat. They can handle all the heat in the world and they don't expand, but they just absorb and absorb and absorb and absorb the heat a whole bunch until they have to get rid of some of it, and where they send it is into the rings. And the rings will eventually expand to the point where you'll lose all your ring gap and bust out a piston land. So I'm thinking that if I ceramic coat the top of the piston, that'll prevent heat from getting into the piston in the first place, which should prevent any heat from getting into my rings, which should prevent catastrophic failure. At least that's my theory. I have no idea if it's going to work, but this is an experiment. That's why it's also a stock engine, is this is an experimental engine. I don't want to spend a bunch of money on fancy rods and stuff if I'm going to end up completely annihilating the thing. And that is probably this thing's fate, is complete and utter annihilation. But let's put some pistons in it. Oh. That is unforeseen. Alright, so I guess there's something else with the ARP main studs. Looks like I'm going to have to notch out this, because it's interfering on the top of the studs. So, I'll be right back. Alright, so I got that clearance now. Now it's, now to clear the bolts. Or the studs. Alright, so that's the bottom end all done. So we'll flip it over and start putting the head on and stuff. Alright, so now the cylinder's head on. A thing to note is that the ARP studs will change your torque numbers. You'll go 20, 40, 60 instead of 22, 33, 90. 90 degrees. So keep that in mind. So that's all torqued down to 60. And I'll spit some timing on there. Alright, so we got the head on and the cams in and we're ready to do the timing. So I'll explain the intake cam mod for those of you that don't know what it is. I'll explain it. So what we got going on here is we've got our regular intake cam and we've got our exhaust cam. Well, what we've done is if you can get your hands on a second intake cam, you can run it as your exhaust cam. All you have to do is just time it 180 degrees out, and it would be the exact same cam timing. And what you gain from it is a little bit more lift and duration. So if you looked at the exhaust cam and the intake cam side by side, visually there's not going to be a lot that you could see with your eyeballs that'd be different. But if you actually measure them, the exhaust cam runs a slightly less lift and duration than the intake cam. So what this will do is it just kind of opens up a little bit more flow on the exhaust side. It actually makes the exhaust flow equal to the intake flow because the valves are now opening and closing the exact same distance for the exact same amount of time on both sides instead of having it slightly different, very slightly different. But what you can also do is you see my white mark, and that is 180 degrees off exactly from where the actual dot is for timing it properly. So you draw a line there. Now what you can do is you can actually retard where you put it on the timing chain by 1 or 2 teeth. So this would be 180 out, this would be 1 tooth, this would be 2 tooth. And what you'd gain from these extra tooth is you're going to start creating a bit of valve overlap so that the exhaust valve is open slightly, or the exhaust starts to open as the intake valve is still open as well. And you might be able to get a bit of a scavenging effect where you can get the exhaust to help pull in a bit of intake air with the negative pressure behind the exhaust gas as it's leaving out the cylinder. It's a common naturally aspirated trick for making horsepower is valve overlap. So we can kind of achieve that. Now, in a turbo application, I don't know if that's really a good idea because you're going to be basically losing boost out the exhaust. However, I'll spill the beans now. This isn't going to be a turbo motor. This is kind of the test mule for the turbo motor, and there's also a lot of really cool expensive things that I want to do to the turbo motor, and I'm getting impatient and I want to go race my car. So this is going to be a very well built slightly modified stock engine that I'm gonna put on a bottle and run an ass ton of nitrous through. And that should be a lot of fun. So I can already hear y'all, whoa, turbo, turbo, turbo. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. But I'm going to play with some laughing gas for a bit and have some fun with that because I'm not prejudiced against power adders. They make a bunch of different ones and I'll use them. I don't care. Whatever makes power, I'm happy. So we're going to do that, and I am going to actually retard it back the full 2 teeth. And as far as on the what you'll notice while driving this setup is if you leave it naturally aspirated, all you're really doing is you're taking about 4 to 5 horsepower from your lower RPM range, say 2,000 to 4,000 RPM, and you're just taking about 4 or 5 horsepower from that range and moving it above 4,500 RPM. So you'll notice that the car, might want to stall out a little more when letting the clutch out, so you might need a higher rev to keep it running. But other than that, that's basically what it is in a nutshell. So as far as timing it goes, as long as you know what tooth you're putting this exhaust cam on, as long as you know what tooth you're putting on the chain, timing is exactly the same as timing a regular stock engine. You just got to know what tooth you're looking to line up with your Silverlink. So that all being said, I think I covered everything. Oh, one more thing. To do this mod, there is a little safety thing right here that you'll have to grind down that sits under this ring. And they did that as a fail-safe so that you couldn't do this, so that you didn't accidentally put an intake cam in and time it properly. They put that in so that this ring would interfere with what's in the head and you wouldn't be allowed to actually put the cam in there. I had that milled down at the machine shop. So, yeah, no need there to worry. And you might have to grind that down if you want to do this. If you have a 3rd gen car, they kind of did away with that, and you can just do the mod. It works exactly the same way in a 3rd gen car. It's just the cams are slightly different, so you can't use 2nd gen or 1st gen cams. So all that being said, we can get some timing on this motor, and we're one step closer to getting it in the car. Oh, so there we go. That white line that lines up with that. That lines up where I want it to line up. There's my mark, and then there's one tooth. There's the 2nd tooth. That's exactly what I want. And then on the bottom, those two are directly in line with that mark there, which is in line with that mark there. Is exactly opposite there is the middle of those 2 links. So this thing's timed. So we'll give it a quick spin and make sure we're not gonna make contact with anything. Alright guys, so after you get the timing all done, the only thing left to do is the oil pan and the valve cover, so I just quickly did those. Now you can see that I kind of bought a bunch of other stuff all bolted on. The manifolds are both bolted on, and a few other things, and that's mostly just so that I can organize all of the stuff so I'm not looking for it when I'm putting it in the car, because I took this thing apart like 6 months ago, so I'm just finding and organizing and making sure I've got all the right bolts and all the right stuff and know where everything is. The only thing I can't seem to find is my tensioner and my idler. I may have thrown them out because they may have been no good. I don't remember. So I'm still looking for those two. The alternator and the starter are in the car. The power steering pump is in the car. Other than that, I got dipstick in, exhaust manifold all sorted out, thermostat and everything else there all sorted out, water pump pulley, bracket, flywheel and clutcher over there. We'll get into those in the next episode. And yeah, that brings us pretty much to the end of this episode. In the next episode, we will put it in the car. So until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.